it's not always necessary to say things. And what I've realized, it's actually more necessary to use your actions and for people to see what you're talking about.
Welcome to another episode of the Climate Conscious Podcast. I am your host, Derval Barzey. Welcome to the Climate Conscious Podcast, Lydia Valladares.
Hello, thank you for having me, Derval. I'm excited to be on your podcast and yeah.
Lydia Valladares is passionate about our environment, cooking, and personal growth. She is a first-generation Guyanese, born and raised in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Currently, she runs a plant-based vegan catering company, Lydia Valo Foods, creating whole food, plant-based meals and meal prep, focusing on local ingredients. I'll share more of Lydia's bio on our social media platforms, but let's hear from Lydia herself. So tell me, Lydia, how do you go from college for fashion design to organic farming in Hawaii?
Yes, so there's been quite a bit of a gap in the timeline there. So it did happen over a course of, I would probably say, about 8 years. And it was kind of a slow transition, I would say, just because it's life. And it happened because I've always been interested in gardening, farming, growing food. I grew up with my mom having a big garden in the backyard. Every summer we would get super excited and go out there. And so it's something that I've always been interested in. So even though I love fashion design and all things fashion, there's just certain things that slowly pulled me away from the fashion industry. One, working in the fashion industry is not always the easiest. Two, sometimes the pay is not always the greatest. And three, sometimes, life can just shift for you sometimes and other doors and avenues can open for you. So I would say over that 8 years, I really got involved in a community garden plot that was in my neighborhood in Vancouver, Canada. And I met some really interesting people and spent about like 5 or 6 years or years of learning how to grow food on my own, even though I had always been around that from my mom having her own garden. So I wouldn't say there was like an actual shift where I made a direct decision, but it's an accumulation of inspirations and things that have inspired me over the years to shift away from fashion. So I kind of was at a point in my life where I wanted something to change. This experience in Hawaii, it just came across my path and I just went for it because I was, prepared. I was preparing myself without even really knowing I was preparing myself just to leap into something new. It was scary, but I did it. That's my answer. That's my long answer.
I love it. You mentioned that life can shift, and I think as individuals, we're meant to evolve and not confine ourselves into perfect boxes, but be open to exploring and sometimes taking the unexpected path, which you definitely did.
Yes, and it was a very unexpected path, especially because it happened at the age of 30. So usually at that time in life, a lot of people I find, well, I should say most of my friends and people around me were kind of like in a career for a while or they were just starting their career. And it was just something that I noticed for me. I had just immediately switched careers or not even careers, but just switched what I was doing. I put my life on pause that was happening and just decided to, go in a different direction. So yeah, it can happen sometimes. And it can be scary, but it could also be something like really exciting because if you have the time and the opportunity to do something that you're passionate about, you might as well. You only live once.
It's funny that you mentioned that this happened around the age 30 because I came across this meme recently that I saved because it resonated so much with me. It says, your 30s
Okay.
are for unlearning all the conformity you picked up in your teens and 20s and getting back to the weirdo you were as a kid.
Hmm. It's true. Unlearning things is it's probably one of the most interesting things because when you unlearn things, you change your habits and you change how you go about doing things, and that can actually change the relationships in your life, and then that can just change into your perspective on life as well, and it can really open doors, close doors, and lead you into a different space that you might not even really even knew was there, you know?
Yeah, and we're definitely called to continue learning and unlearning things, especially given the growing complexity of the world that we live in and the challenges that we have to face. So
Hmm.
that's definitely important, I think, as a survival skill.
Yeah. And one of the things that I really feel like I unlearned is everything that everyone always talks about how sometimes as human beings in the society that we're being programmed to do everything. And honestly, like kind of when I stepped out of city life, urban life, life in Canada, and just was, I wouldn't use the word isolated. I was farming. So you're not really in an urban setting. There's not really a lot of people around and you're in nature essentially. Well, where I was, there was a lot of nature around. Sometimes industrial agriculture can not have a lot of nature around. There's only one or two crops growing. So, I was in nature and it forced me to unlearn a lot of things that I didn't even realize that that had programmed me down to even getting ready in the morning and putting on makeup before I had to like leave my house and stuff like that. Like all of these small things that are in our minds, thinking that, oh, this is when I wake up, I have to go and do this, or just even a thought or an idea about an industry or a topic. Like lots of things in my mind really started to shift and change. And, um, not only around food and the environment, but like really how I saw myself in that situation and like where I was in my life at the time. And you really start to grow as a person in a different direction, if you're open to that. And, you know, sometimes people are scared to change, but like if you're open to like growing and stuff, you can really, yeah, you really start to embrace unlearning and you can really start to learn a whole bunch of new and other things that, people are teaching you or just life itself is teaching you.
Yes, life is always teaching us something. So, what has
Yes.
been your experience becoming a vegan and what has the journey been like so far?
Yeah, so I have been vegan for the last 8, 9 years. It's technically 9 years, August 14th. That's the date. But really and truly, when I decided to fully go plant-based vegan and not make any little, oh, if it was cooked with this, then yeah, it's all right. I'll just take the meat out or something like that. I fully committed probably in like 2015 in January. Sorry, yeah, 2015 January. And that transition from, eating a conventional, regular, I don't want to use the word diet, but like just the way of eating, to veganism actually completely and totally changed my life in every single aspect, down to how I view food, relationships with my family, relationships with my friends, relationships with myself, body image. There's so many things that come into that. There's so many things that happen in your life when you change what you eat, and not only change what you eat, but change what you eat from everybody else around you. Being eating a plant-based diet and being vegan, having completely different thoughts based around the environment and animals compared to my friends and my families or coworkers. That relationship I realized was changing, because I went from just, hey, what's up, Lydia? How are you doing? How was your weekend? To, what are you eating? Oh, Lydia needs to eat a different menu, or oh, don't say that around Lydia. She gets offended like that, or like all these things. So like the transition from me being vegan, it was easy for the food part of being vegan. It was very simple for me. It was never something that I struggled with. But the other side of being vegan and learning, you are literally relearning all different types of things, like socially and personally, and like even how to grocery shop, or even how to put a meal together. There the first part of the first year or two of becoming vegan was a huge shift, and changed the way viewed everything, really. And I would have to say the last like 5 years, I have a lot more confidence in how I answer questions or how I respond to things. I'm a lot softer and gentler and kinder when it comes to listening to other people and their thoughts or their opinions, or not being as judgmental, things like that. Because honestly, like what people say about, oh, vegans are like a certain way, or they're, what word do they use? Military? What is that word that people
Militant.
say? Militant, yes. When people say, oh, vegans are militant, I wasn't necessarily like that, but I would always have something to say in response, or I would always be standing up and being vocal. And I realized, like, that's actually unnecessary, to always say what's on your mind, or always stand up for, um, put in quotes, the animals or like the planet. It's not always necessary to say things. And what I've realized, it's actually more necessary to use your actions and for people to see what you're talking about, instead of people hearing what you're saying and just seeing an emotion, or seeing, you know, like if you're angry or happy, or like how you're conveying the message, you know. So, um, I find that like that I have definitely seen a transition for myself from when I first became vegan, as a person, like personally, like who I am, um, to where I am now.
There's so much involved in getting from the seed to our plates. And I think it's important that we have those
Hmm.
conversations to increase our awareness of all that is involved in feeding ourselves and how we can make that
Yeah.
process more sustainable, more environmentally friendly, and
Hmm.
also healthier. So, as we're on that topic, based on your experience in farming and now working in the food industry, how do you see our food system, our health, and the climate being interconnected?
Yeah. So a lot of people talk about food being shipped all over the world, and should we really be shipping bananas and avocados and these tropical foods, or foods that are from the north all the way like to the south? Should we be doing that? And, regardless, I think that's going to happen whether or not. But what we should really be focusing on is how we're growing all of this food. And conventional agriculture is actually probably one of the most destructive things that is on our planet, that we're doing every single day, when we're slashing and burning, tearing down old growth forests or newer growth forests. Then we are doing intensive till agriculture. And then we're using herbicide and pesticide and genetically modified seed to grow all of this food, so that we're actually not getting the nutrition that we used to be getting out of our food. And at the same time, we're destroying our soils and our planet. And we're actually losing our sovereignty as individuals, and collectively. We are, we are being fed all of these new ways of living, when we should actually be taking care of the land and learning how to work with the land and being one with the land instead of being so disconnected. Even if we live in urban areas, we can still be a part of our ecosystem.
Being one with the land, even if you are living in an urban area, could you expand a bit more on that? Because I think that's an important point. If you're in a rural setting, it's pretty obvious in
Yeah.
terms of the land and nature and being part of that ecosystem. But oftentimes you lose that connection by being in a quote unquote concrete jungle, and it's definitely
Yes.
a different experience. So how can we, regardless of
Yeah.
the setting, remain connected to the land?
Well, there's actually a few things right off the top of my head. There's obviously urban farm projects that are popping up all over cities, all over the world that we see, which is really great. And I think it actually really helps on an educational part, but also helps people reconnect back to the land and also allows us to grow food in the seasons that we can grow food. I think it's really important to see all these new innovations people are using with different forms of growing, aquaponics, or rooftop garden, these amazing rooftop garden systems that we have in cities. So, we're greening from above if we're not doing it indoors. And also, I think that our government should take some more initiative and green our urban areas with planting trees along the roadways, sidewalks, pathways that people walk instead of having roads and landscapes that are void of all trees and only have some small bushes. Climate change is a real thing, and it has been proven and shown in many different ways that if our land isn't covered with trees, the sun comes down and bakes the earth and increases the temperature of that area. Even from being directly under a tree and moving 1 yard or 1 meter over and standing in the sun, that temperature difference can be 20 degrees. So I think that there's little things that we can do, from starting little urban community garden plots or having, pots on your balcony if you live in an apartment, to if you have like a restaurant and you have a rooftop area, you can have a garden there or work with a corporation and use their area up there and, supply microgreens to restaurants in your city, and to the government taking initiative and, planting native species or rewilding certain areas so we can work on climate change and at every different level. And it can also be a way of showing our children how we can improve our future instead of heading towards such degradation.
One thing that stands out to me is when you said that along your veganism journey, the hardest part wasn't really your food or changing the
Mm-hmm.
food that you eat, but it was really all the things, the other aspects of your life that changed,
Yes.
the relationships. It reminded me that change requires courage. We have to have courage to change, especially when it goes against the grain. And then you also mentioned about coming to the realization that your actions speak louder than your words. And
Yes.
sometimes just being the example can be even more powerful than speaking at
Yeah.
people. And I think it's
Mm-hmm.
relevant. This is the Climate Conscious podcast where we are advocating for more effective climate action and sustainable development. You could find yourself maybe singing the same song over and over, but maybe being the example and doing what you can is what really sends a strong message and what really could inspire others to reflect on where they can get involved or what actions they can take in their own space. So Lydia, can you share a bit about your experience volunteering with Community Carbon Trees?
So, Community Carbon Trees is an NGO in Costa Rica that focuses on planting endangered and rare species of trees, hardwood trees included, on degraded land, typically degraded from cattle farming. So, Costa Rica has a large cattle farming agriculture practices there because of the subsidies they got in the 70s and 80s to grow cheap meat for North America. Now, what is happening in Costa Rica are those lands where cattle has been farmed for the last couple decades are very degraded. And a lot of these farms are on the sides of mountains. And what happens is the mountains, because Costa Rica has heavy rainfall, the mountains will slowly slide down and cause all the things, the devastations you're seeing with the mudslides and the flooding and everything. And so you have these farmers and these families that are in huge states of suffering where they had incomes before, they had land that was abundant, and now they're kind of like sitting on this dead land. So community carbon trees goes in there and works not with the community, but specifically works with the family to teach the family every aspect of what it means to have a reforestation project on your land, learning how to clean the land properly around where you want your trees, talking to them about seed collection, how to go and find the seeds, collect them, and not to store them, but to plant them right away into a nursery. And so you have a nursery of hardwood trees, endangered species trees, fruit trees that can feed your family and your neighbors and can also help the environment. And so Community Carbon Trees works with the family for 4 years and does about 4 trips a year to the farm after they've done planted out their property to go and clean around the trees with machetes, making sure that the tree, when it's at its youngest state, doesn't get taken over by all of the vines and grasses and other plants. And so they would clean around the tree so the tree can catch light and grow tall and get big. And after 4 years, these trees have grown to quite a large size, and the farmers and the families can start seeing the change from their land being this red, muddy, patchy grass land to a small forest being started. And I think that is something that I never really understood all these aspects of reforestation. And when I was working for this uh, community carbon trees, I really got to see all of the hard work and what it actually takes to keep and maintain a forest, because everyone's like, oh, a forest can just regrow. A forest can just regrow, but like, how long does it take to grow, especially when everything is slashed? Grasses and weeds and vines take over first, and sometimes they can hinder a baby tree that can grow really large and, suck in all this CO2. It can hinder those trees from growing. So it really needs these people who are doing this back-breaking work. I'm talking about like taking trees on your back, about 20 or 30 trees in these things, walking through a forested area. Sometimes the trucks can't even get there, and like replanting it and going back 4 times a year, maintaining these things. Community Carbon Trees also pays the families for 4 years. They treat it almost like a job. That's where the donations come in. The donations actually help pay the families. So it's not just something that they're doing where, oh, I just want to reforest my land. They're treating it almost like a job. So they want to do it. One, they have pride in their own land, and two, they're actually getting paid for it, which we actually should be getting paid for these jobs. Most of these things are volunteer, but we should. This is some of the hardest work I've ever done in my life. You're out there with snakes and wasps and itchy plants and mud, and I've seen mudslides. When I was there in Costa Rica, there was a huge flood that happened there, and just seeing people in these areas, sorry, it's just taking me back to a moment, because when the flood happened, there was a whole agriculture community that was growing coconuts and bananas, and the whole entire side of the mountain came down. The river brought down all the mud with it and just dropped it off where these people lived. And some of these things wouldn't be happening if we didn't slash and burn and cut down all of the forests that are actually holding our planet together.
So you shared that one of your goals is encouraging people to move away from processed and packaged food. How have you set about to change the food industry in your own way?
So I have a plant-based vegan catering company here in Guyana, and I am really dedicated and focused on using the most sustainable environmental packaging that I can find. And not only that, but the actual ingredients that I use, I really try to focus on using all the products that come from the market to create a whole food plant-based meal for my customers. And this is really inspired from all of the traveling that I've done and seeing all of the different interesting ways that people have been creating all of these delicious meals just with food from the farm. There's been so many times we've been at a farm and like literally all we have is a pot and they just go and collect some things and create such a delicious meal. And so it's like little things like this that are like really exciting, you know? So yeah, when I go to the market, I'm always thinking about what can I buy that's in paper or glass. I really try to avoid anything that is in plastic and or even in a tin. Those like in a tin or a Tetra Pak packaging. For instance, I buy these olives at the grocery store across the street from my house, and you have an option to buy them in a tin or you have an option to buy them in glass. And even though it's like a little bit more expensive, I opt to buy it in glass. There is a, a lesser footprint on the environment when it comes to using glass, and I can reuse the glass container. Always I can reuse a glass container. But when the aluminum can is mined for metal and it's a single use metal product, we're putting it in the recycling bin. And the majority of the time, a lot of our um, things thrown in the recycling bin aren't being used. Mostly plastics, but yes, metals do get used more than plastics. But in Guyana here, there is no recycling, so I still will opt to use for the glass. As when I go to the market, I make sure to carry bags if I know I'm going street shopping. If I leave the house and I'm 1 block away, I'm going to walk back to my house and I'm going to grab my cloth bag or any bag that I have to go grocery shopping because I have to make a commitment if I'm going to talk about it or if I'm going to want values. My actions have to match the values that I have. This is how we progress and step forward, and people can see our actions and we can inspire other people. And we can also just inspire ourselves to say, oh, we're doing this. Oh, I'm a part of this. Oh, I'm making good choices. And it helps us make better choices and it helps other people see us make these choices and uh, progress in a direction that we want to go towards.
I have first-hand experience with your vegan plant-based meals. And although I'm not vegan, I really enjoy the meals that you prepare and also the influences from your travels. So it's kind of like eating the world, but in a good way. So you've shared about your personal experience, your personal transition. Can you also share with listeners who are also interested in their personal journey? And we know that everyone's journey to improving their sustainability looks different. But the important thing is that we are each inspired to take action in our own way. So for someone who wants to improve the sustainability of their connection to food, what are some practical solutions for climate conscious food systems and diets?
One of the things that we can do is specifically talking about our diets is shifting away from overly processed and packaged foods because of all of the health impacts that it has on us, but all of the impacts that it actually has on our environment. There's a lot of really unhealthy packaged foods that contain really specific ingredients that we can talk about, like palm oil. Palm oil is one of the most destructive things in Southeast Asia, that we probably have all heard and seen little clips on reels or watched in documentaries or on a video somewhere. And when you look at the back of these products that we're buying or these foods that we're buying, you can see all of the ingredients listed. And one of the main ingredients is palm oil, and so when you stop using these products, not only are you not supporting these industries, but you're also supporting your health, because when we're eating foods that contain numbers and colors and dyes and ingredients that are destroying our planet, this isn't helping us in any kind of way. This is giving into marketing, and this is giving into all of the different kind of additives they've added to trick your brain into thinking that you want more of this food. And so when we remove all of these processed and packaged foods, we actually really get to awaken our taste buds when we eat a whole food plant-based diet, because when we remove the salt, the sugar, and the fat away from our diet and we eat a whole food plant-based diet, nuts, seeds, legumes, and fruits containing high amounts of water in it, our palates, our tongues begin to come alive again, and we remember what food tastes like, and we don't think it's as bitter or as tasteless anymore. We really get to understand what these foods are, and they become delicious to us. I really enjoyed a chip before. Like, I loved Pringles. I loved Miss Vicky's. I loved them so much. But then when I went raw vegan for 3 weeks and I embraced eating lots of different fruits and vegetables and rediscovered what food actually tastes like, I really do think that, how we've been marketed has clouded our judgments to the point where we can't even understand what actually tastes good to us anymore. The packaging itself in all of the products and all of the sanitary products and all of the products that we're ordering online, all of these products come packaged generally in plastic. And if it comes packaged in paper, those also have effects. But most of the things that we're buying today are wrapped in plastic. And when we're talking about food, if we're buying food that is already not good for us and it's wrapped in plastic, and we don't really recycle and use recycled plastic in our industries, these are all things that have negative effects that we can look at and say, okay, I actually have a choice of buying this snack in a package, or I can buy these fruits that are actually already packaged by nature. All of these foods are grown, and actually, when I was listening to a raw vegan talk, they've already actually been cooked by the sun. A fruit is actually perfectly ready for you when it's ripe. It actually gives off a smell and it tells you, eat me. I'm packaged and I'm ready to eat. I contain high levels of nutrients. I contain high levels of water and vitamins for your body. These are the kind of foods that, we should be focused on eating. And it's little things like, if we could start these little farm projects in our schools, in our balconies, or in our homes, our backyards, or even, if there's a new neighborhood being built, instead of just planting regular old trees, plant fruit trees all along that people can eat and enjoy. It can be a whole new system that we can create in our world, to have these different ways of looking at how we really live day to day, and, how all of our industries affect how we are living and eating.
In order to safeguard both our health and the environment, we really need to radically change the way that we engage with food, the way that we produce, distribute, manage, and consume food. And therefore, becoming climate conscious consumers means considering the choices that we make and being intentional about reducing the negative impacts, such as reducing waste.
Yeah.
It might be inconvenient, but I think it's a small price to pay for preserving our planet. So,
Yeah.
on that note, I would like to ask you, Lydia, as we close, what would make the world a better place?
Everyone going vegan. No, what would make the world a better place? Honestly, there's a lot of things that can make the world a better place, but if I were to answer the question in what can I do or what can we do personally in our lives to take the step to making the world a better place. Sorry, I'm going to rephrase your question there. um, I there's so much going on in our world right now. You know, a lot of bad things are happening in our world right now, and right now in history, because so much has changed so rapidly over the last 100 years. Um, Sometimes it's actually hard to really see solutions when you look at it on a bigger scale. I get overwhelmed with the thought of how can we make this world a better place. But then I just stop looking outside of myself and I say to myself, how can I make the world around me a better place? Even though I might be making horrible decisions that day, or I, you know, wasn't the best person the other day, or like whatever. How can we, in our own worlds, whether or not you are a stay-at-home mom, or you work in a corporate environment, or you work like a very meaningless job that you don't like going to, there's things in our life that have more of an impact, I find, like changing our daily habits. I would say one of the best things that we could do is if you have a yard, if you have a space to grow food, if you have a patio with pots, I suggest planting food and growing it and sharing it with people, learning how to plant it in an organic way, teaching yourself, and maybe if you have children, teaching them. You know, there's a great forgetting that happened with our generation. And that, if we're teaching children this, they can apply it to their life in the future.
Thank you, Lydia.
Yes, Derval, thank you so much for having me on your podcast.
Where can listeners connect with you?
Listeners can follow me at Lydia Vallo Food, LYDIA Food, FOOD. You can find my vegan, whole food, plant-based vegan meals and catering services there. And I would love to connect with you and see you there. All right.
This brings us to the end of another episode of the Climate Conscious podcast. See show notes for more details. Visit theclimateconscious.com for more info and consider leaving us a review on your favorite podcast app. Thank you for listening.